Welcome to the Next Level Casino Careers Show, a series highlighting industry tips and insights from the best minds in the casino and hospitality industry. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Next Level Casino Careers. Joining me today is Bob Boughner. Bob has over 40 years of experience in the gaming industry, most notably as a senior executive working for Boyd Gaming Corporation. Bob, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Peter. It really is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And, you know, at 40 years, that's a tremendous amount of time to be in a fun business like the casino business. For those of you who are unfamiliar about your story, maybe you could take it just a little bit from before that time period. What led you to the casino industry? You know, what sort of attracted you to it? And how did you get there? And then maybe walk us through sort of that early time in your career. What was that like?
Well, Peter, it was an interesting start. I will say that. I went to University of Arizona for a couple of years, and I was a journalism major at the time. And I realized that journalism was really not going to be my career. I took some time off, and I went to work at a hotel in Las Vegas. The name of that, that was in Phoenix, rather. And the name of that hotel was the Arizona Biltmore. It was a very prestigious hotel. I really enjoyed working there. And one day, the vice president of food and beverage walked around in the area that I was working, and he said, "Come talk to me one day. I want to talk to you a little bit more." And to kind of cut to the chase with the conversation, he really gave me some good guidance. And as a result of that, I ended up taking a look to see what it might be like in Las Vegas. And sure enough, I thought it was a good idea. And I moved to Las Vegas and I got a job. I got a job when I moved there within 3 or 4 days, which was great. I was really excited about that. And only that it really wasn't going to be a good long-term position. But I did find another job. And I went to work at a place called the California Hotel in downtown Las Vegas. Sort of the irony of all of that was that I never left.
Yeah.
And I never left. I spent 40 years working at that company, and it was a spectacular experience for me. And then I spent another 6 years after that working on their board. And it was a great experience all the way around. Much more I can tell, but that's really the history in a nutshell.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know, Bob, you know, as you mentioned, you started working at the California with the Boyd Group at the time, and then watched it transform and helped it transform from a family-run business into a publicly traded corporation in the early 90s, I believe, is when that transition occurred. So you actually got to watch and be a part of that from the inside. Over that time period, with the amount of change and vision and the business, I mean, you know, back in 1976, where you mentioned where you joined, came to Vegas, you know, I think people sometimes forget that table games was actually the predominant the game of choice on casino floors. And slots was secondary. And boy, have things changed over the years. And, you know, it's kind of went the opposite direction. And with the city changing as well, you know, I think there was a small stint where it was a family destination, or at least tried to be more family. And then it transforming into this world where there's, you know, conventions and groups and clubs. I mean, that's quite a spectrum of change during that time period. You were there front and center for all of that. What has struck you looking back as, you know, what has kept you engaged, and how did you, if you can think back to your professional development, how did you stay abreast of those changes and help lead the company that you were working at the time into the future as these new developments and factors began to change?
So, Peter, thanks. That's a really good question. And I've got a few things to say about that. Over the course of that 40 years, it turned out that I would do something different about every 10 years. There was no program in place for that, that's for sure, but it was something that I aspired to in sort of retrospectively. I took a fair amount of time in my early years working in food and beverage. It was an area that I had become accustomed to, and it was something that I enjoyed. And working for Boyd Gaming, it was a great experience to work in food and beverage. And then as that time moved on, about 10 years later, the company started expanding rather to a high level by acquiring properties and building properties. And I spent about 20 years doing that. And that was the next level. It was a point in time where I would say that my success in the business was a function of other people. It wasn't a function of me. And I think that was a critical point, I think, through the course of my learning. And I say this with a certain level of humility, and at the same time pure honesty, is I learned so much from the other people that had great experience in the business, and I took my time with that. And as a result of that, I found that it was an education. To me, one of the things that was so important to me was I had great mentors, and over the course of time, these were, I would say, principally, and this is no longer exactly the truth on a go-forward basis, but it was mostly men working in the industry. Women weren't really necessarily given a shot in those days, but over time that changed. But I had a lot of great mentors, and they gave me the opportunity to learn, not just about the games, not just about table games or slots or anything else, or even racing sports. They gave me the opportunity to learn about people.
And so tugging on that a little bit, I know that you were a mentor to many as well. So you certainly have paid it forward, over your career. How did you translate what you were receiving from your mentors and help push that forward to others? Was there a specific, sort of approach that worked out well for you that you could share with us today?
So I would say that I over a period of time, I changed my MO. At the beginning, I said, oh, well, let's do this. And I would talk to people, let's say, about a book. Or I would talk to people about the industry overall, we'll say. But over time, I took a little different strategy. I was focused on how the business was going to operate. And as opposed to, that was in the early years. And then I moved away from just simply being the guy that was focusing on how to operate. I really wanted to communicate to people that people were really the heart of all of that, Peter. That was, I'm not sure that I answered your question, but I go back to that topic because it's something that's very near and dear to me.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point. The buildings can be built to be beautiful, but it's really the people that make it special. I think that's kind of what I'm taking away from it, in that your thought of, okay, operationally, you have to nail it, but it's the people that you have to depend on to make it work, and investing in those people and spending time developing them is really the key to success.
Well, that's absolutely true. And there's no question that over time, you can, as a leader, a manager, an executive, however you happen to position yourself along the way, even those titles, ultimately, I'm not sure exactly what they mean anymore. But I think what they meant to me, and that I also view today on a go-forward basis, people have that, the same view, is that it's really boils down to the people and educating people and giving them opportunities to expand, giving them time to develop their own skills, and not to be hanging around the hoop all the time, making all the decisions for them. I think that's something that I learned along the way, is that it was really important for me to have other folks stand up and get the job done. And I didn't necessarily need the person who made all those decisions.
You brought up a good point. I just want to tug on there. You mentioned education, Bob, and I know that education is near and dear to your heart. You made a significant gift to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I believe the Career Development Center out there is named after you. As an alum of UNLV, I just want to say thank you for that. I think that's a wonderful give back to the community. But the question I want to pose to you is a question that I receive a lot. Many times I see people on the floor, they come into my office, and one of the questions they like to ask me is, Peter, how important is a formal education? And, to what kind of degree should I get? Or, it could vary as to the specifics around that formal education, but it is a question that I receive often. I'm curious, how would you answer that? What is your sort of response and thought to the question of formal education? And I believe it's changed over the years. So, today in today's world, how important is that?
I think it's very important today, Peter. I would say that it is important enough for people to take the time and the effort to complete their education in a way that suits them. In the industry that I've been raised up in my life here, food and beverage, and then past that to gaming and to a great deal, there are many people that happen to be in the gaming industry that do not have a lengthy education. But that doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing the job.
Right. Formal education doesn't mean that you're going to be a great leader. It gives you the tools and sort of the foundation in which to solve problems. At least that's how it's kind of benefited me. It gives me a starting place to be able to solve complex matters.
And well put. And I think that's very valid. At the same time, the industry has gotten a bit more complex, and technology has changed it dramatically. And I think it's really important that the individuals who seek to operate those departments and those aspects of the business should have a good education that marries and aligns with that.
Well, talking about where we're at today in the industry, you mentioned technology. Where do you see it? Where do you see the industry today? And it's kind of difficult because I'm not sure that we've really found our quote unquote stride post pandemic. But I think we're far enough away from the pandemic where I think we can begin to see where this is all kind of going to land. And what have you observed? What are your thoughts on the industry as a whole?
Well, I have a point of view about technology strategy, if you will. I don't think it's about a business having a technology strategy. I think it's about a company that has woven technology in its organization. And I think that makes a difference. Otherwise, we end up with these cubicles of developers, but they perhaps don't even understand the business. And I think that's really important. The business, meaning the business that they are there to operate, the business that they need to know and understand what customers think. And I think that's a really relevant part of the conversation is, technology is extremely important and very valuable. But let's remember who we're trying to serve in the process.
You kind of bring up another great perspective here, which is thoughtful planning and strategic thinking. And the Borgata, when you developed that at the time, was a game changer for that particular market. It was something that you hadn't seen before in that market. So you were thinking ahead. You were thinking about how to interweave these new concepts into a construct that didn't exist at the time. Right. So when you look back on it and the lesson of thinking big and defining a strategy and then executing upon that, what are something that you could tell us today, now that you've had a chance to look back on that experience, that people today can take the words that you mentioned right now about weaving technology into your organization? what kind of lessons from that Borgata experience? Because what you're really talking about is sort of in a way rethinking how we do business and perhaps how we repackage it, and maybe not completely blowing it up, but repackaging something there and thinking of a new way to move forward. What sort of tips can you share with us based on that experience?
Sure. No, the Borgata experience was a great experience for me personally. I enjoyed it immensely. Just go back a little bit in time. I had the opportunity to go to New Jersey and spend a little time there initially. And ultimately, I decided, this is a place where I want to stay. This is something that I really want to do. And I left my position at Boyd Gaming, and I was the chief operating officer of the company. And I moved on to a different position, which was basically developing and operating Borgata. It was a great experience for me, and I think that I spent a fair amount of time developing very simple things to say to people. And one of them, which was very important and still is in my mind today, which is product, position, process, pricing, and people. And that was really the very beginning, the heart of what we chose to do. What was the product going to be? It was necessary to figure that out. Product, position. What was the property going to look like? Where was it going to fit its role in the city of Atlantic City? And go on down the line. And ultimately, pricing, was a very important point, and it was probably the toughest one along the way. We didn't know if we should be at the lower end of the business in terms of the price point, or at the upper end of the business at the price point. And there were some very good and I would say heated and healthy debates around that. Ultimately, we ended up, we just charged higher rates. That was our goal. Why not? We spent a lot of money building a building. We spent a lot of money through the course of time to get it to feel right, to have the best possible staff that we could recruit, and recruited, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but rather we recruited a great crew of people. And when it was all said and done, that strategy really worked.
Yeah, I think it manifests itself into a wonderful experience. I certainly recall the day I was there on opening day. I was blessed to be able to be there to watch sort of the fanfare and just the look of people's eyes when they were able to see not only the product, but also the people. And there were some very unique experiences in there for the market at that time. And being able to see that wonder in people's eyes as they began to explore the different parts of the property was one of the highlights of my career at that point, and even to this day. So yeah, a lot of what you're saying, I got to see put in action, right? And so that, I think, is one of the best things about what you're saying, is that it does happen and it does work. And for those out there, I know there are many tribes and casinos out there that are building expansions or in some cases brand new casino operations. What sort of, when you head into a project of that magnitude, what sort of advice, if you will, I don't want to use the word advice, words of wisdom, nuggets of truth that people can, write down and maybe perhaps go to that sort of quick list and help ground themselves to get through what is could arguably be the biggest project of their lives. So, any nuggets of truth or wisdom that you'd like to share?
Sure. Well, I think that there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is leaders need to prepare. And that was a critical piece to making the business successful. And I tried to find the best future leaders that I could. And at the same time, I remember looking back on that, I tried to find the best mentors that I could find. And that was, initially, it was not a goal of mine, but I learned that it should be. And ultimately it became, that's the case. And I would say respect for the teams, That was part of it as well. We can't overlook those things in the process of the development. And I also remember that day when we opened the doors, and people were walking in, and we didn't have a whole lot of money to advertise, so we didn't spend a lot of money on advertising. And the reason I mentioned that was because it was, in fact, one outdoor board on the highway that comes in from New York and to Atlantic City. And one outdoor board initially got the job done. Didn't say much, but it was very clever, and ultimately we ended up having a great resounding amount of people that would show up and walk through the space, and they felt very good about it, and we were able to have a successful launch because our people were prepared, and our people cared. I think that made a tremendous difference all the way around.
You mentioned something interesting, and that was that even at that point in your career, you continued to seek mentors and to help you continuously grow and gain insights of your own as well. One thing I recall, and it's still true to this day, is that your leadership style is very approachable, inclusionary, and when I say growth, I mean personal growth focused. I think you have a genuine desire to watch and help people grow. What helped you develop that leadership style? Is there anything in particular that kind of helped spark that you have?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I would say that principally it was the leadership that I followed. That was critical to me, was the fact that I had great leadership above me, and those are the people that I learned from, and that was really important. I would say that I took a lot of credit. I was given a lot of credit, if you will, with the development of Borgata. By the same token, it was really, as I mentioned earlier, it was the people that I was fortunate enough to bring on board. They were the ones that made these huge contributions. I kind of directed the orchestra pretty well, but by the same token, they were the players. I mean, there's no question about it.
Yeah, and a project of that size and scope. Another thing you mentioned was maintaining a healthy amount of respect for one another and for the team as a whole. I think sometimes that gets lost in these sort of bigger projects where it's too easy to overlook individuals. And so, how did you stay grounded with that? And any tips for people out there on how to keep yourself grounded, and was there a specific maybe communication method that you employed during that time period that kept people engaged and recognized, so that they didn't feel like maybe perhaps they were being left out?
So I guess the old expression of management by walking around. That's what I did. I walked around a lot. I knew once the business got going, where did I belong? Did I belong up in the office checking the results from yesterday? Yeah, but that took about 20 minutes, and then I would get out on the floor, and that's where I think most of my time was spent while I was on that job, if you will, was walking around on the floor, meeting customers, engaging with the staff that was there, team members from all departments. I got to walk the back of the house, and it was interesting, but not surprising, I would say, that, and I would strongly encourage future executives to listen to that point, is manage not necessarily by walking around, but just walk around. There's nothing really to manage there. It's to meet the people, the customers, the team members, people that who are lost. They're walking around, and this is going to sound kind of silly, but can you tell me where the men's room is? Yes. can you tell me where the restaurant is, or whatever restaurant? I'm supposed to meet somebody at such and such a place. I didn't necessarily tell them where it was. I brought them there. That was the difference.
Yeah, I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that our guests know everything about our property, right? And for those of us that have large properties, they could come here 10 times and still not know where certain things are. So walking them to their destination is certainly a huge benefit to not only them, but also to yourself, because along the way, I like to talk and engage with the guests, and sometimes they talk my ear off, sometimes they don't. But when they do, it's interesting what I hear sometimes, and there's nuggets of truth that guests have as well. I mean, they're there, they're spending their money, and they know, sometimes they have the best ideas on how to improve something. It's actually been a creative sort of inspiration for me, oftentimes walking the floor, because I can't wait to hear what they're going to say. So some great points there, Bob. Really appreciate you sharing that. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were going to make a point?
Yeah, I was just going to make one other point, which is one of the most interesting parts was when I would meet somebody that had never been there before. I talked to people that I knew, but I also tried to talk to people that might have been, based on their looks, how they would construct their thinking and walking around and asking a question. And I'd walk them someplace. And so where are you from? Oh, well, I'm from New Jersey. Well, where? Well, such and such. Or I'm from New York. Or I'm here from Miami. Oh, really? Tell me about that. Where do you live in Miami? Those are great, simple questions to engage. And we would get business as a result of that, always handing a card.
Yeah, you make great points. Knowing your guests and getting to know them, and for people who are new to a property, they oftentimes are able to shed some lights into some things that maybe you've overlooked as far as directional signage or perhaps the readability of things. I think that's a very common thing that it may look beautiful on a screen in your office, but when it's out on the floor, it could get lost in the sort of the noise, the visual noise of the casino. But these guests will say, like, I was standing right in front of it and I didn't even know it was there. Well, okay, then, maybe we have an issue here. Maybe there's something to that we need to look at.
Yeah, well, you raise a very good point.
It's kind of what I was thinking. But let's shift gears a minute here and go back to the industry as a whole. What opportunities do you think are out there in the industry right now? Any sort of thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the opportunities that exist for the industry is diversification in terms of distribution of the product, but also looking at new locations. I think that's really important to the industry overall. For it to grow, it has to expand in terms of where it's physically located. I think that's going to happen even more over the course of the next decade. That's my personal view on that. I also think that there are opportunities inside the businesses. Think about it, and I think you touched on this a bit earlier. I remember when the industry was, consisted of table games, slot machines, and a gift shop. And that was the nature of that. You'd have a restaurant, sometimes two, and that was how the industry grew up. I remember even the Sands Hotel from a very long time ago. When my first walk through there, that was interesting too. It had a pool, it had a coffee shop, and a fine dining restaurant, and it was great. But what happened to the industry? Well, there were other things: dining, nightlife, retail, entertainment, and entertainment became different things. If you were to go to, let's say, a large property in Las Vegas today, what you might find in terms of entertainment was more than one nightclub. In some cases, beautiful day clubs and multiple restaurants. And that's what people are coming for. They're not necessarily just coming for the experience of playing a 13-foot, 14-foot tall slot machine. That's not the only product that is available. And as a result of that, I think that's one of the ways that properties are improving and also providing things that people did not look at, 10 years ago. Well, I shouldn't say that, 20 years ago. It's changed dramatically, and it has made for a richer experience all the way around. And I think that's not going out of style.
So you mentioned Las Vegas and sort of some of the changes that happened there. There have been some, I think, notable ones recently with regards to sporting events and sports. Pro sports really has taken a foothold in that city. With at first came the Golden Knights with the NHL, then the Raiders came in from the NFL into the city. Now, there's rumors about a possible future Major League Baseball team at some point. And then you have the big announcement, that F1 is coming to the city. And that is generating, I think, a lot of buzz, not only in the United States, but I think throughout the world. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that new development? It looks like the city is taking it up several notches, and with F1, I think that's just like a really big one for the city. Thoughts on that? Could you ever have imagined at some point, 40 years ago that Vegas would have so much going on with respect to professional sports?
Well, I didn't think that we were going to see F1. That's for sure. I would tell you that. I believe that someday, there would be a big team. Oh, there is a big team, downtown. So, but I would say this: I've already driven the route because it's already out. What the route is going to be, and I think this is going to be fun. And where the opportunity is going to be. Well, those opportunities to some degree are already in place, but that's really fascinating. It is going to bring a different customer, and a new customer, and a customer, as you allude to, from different parts of the world. And that's just yet another example of how clever some of the folks who are, I call it running Las Vegas, are thinking about those things. And I think it's going to be terrific. I'm very excited about it personally. And I've been to a race, and that was quite an experience for me. And it'd be nice to be able to have that in our backyard rather. And I think there'll be lots of drones.
Yeah, yes, it's going to be, I think, unlike anything we've seen in our industry for sure, and how it's going to help promote and project our industry out to the greater parts of the world is going to be good, I think, overall. So very excited to see that come to fruition here in the coming years. Shifting gears for one moment, get a little personal on personal growth. Are there any current books that you're reading that stand out as something that someone who's listening may want to consider taking a look at? Or I know we talked about possibly, do you gift books, or what books how do you approach doing that? Any thoughts on really great books out there?
So I would say this, Peter, speaking candidly, I have a lot of books that I buy, and I read some of them, and I give some of them away. And I do that because I want to. And I do that because I think that perhaps the individual would really enjoy it more than I do. I buy books, and sometimes I get, in the first chapter or so, or the very end of the book, and I said, okay, I get it. I understand this. This was a business book, or this was a non-business book. This was a novel of some kind, or a book that took me into a place that really was, very positive, or a book that took me to a place that I really wanted to, close it up. I would say that. I'm actually, the most recent set of books I bought, there's 7 of them. It's called the Harry Potter series. My 8.5-year-old son is now reading those books. And, that was one of those things that, said, hey, listen, I read Harry Potter. I know what that's about. So now he's doing it.
Well, that's fantastic. It's fantastic to hear that he's reading that as well. That's sort of a fun connection to have with your son. Talking about creative inspiration, are there any activities that you engage in that sort of helps you think more creatively or helps spark that creative thought?
Well, I would say this. Probably the things that I've been focusing on, I'm going to say in the last 8 or 9 years, I've focused on reading about health. That was something that I didn't focus on in my earlier years. But when I decided that, well, wait a minute now, I think I can learn from being healthy. So being healthy is pretty important to me. I learned finally how to eat. I learned how to sleep, and I learned how to smile. And those were deficiencies that I had maybe earlier in my life, and I feel like today those are significant parts of my life.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us, Bob. Any particular favorite quotes you have out there?
So there's one that comes to mind. It's a quote that is something that I take very dearly and in a positive way. It kind of goes like this. Real joy comes not from the ease of riches or the praise of men, but from doing something worthwhile.
That's very powerful. That is a very powerful quote there, Bob. Thank you for sharing that with us. Certainly gives a lot of us some pause, right, to think through exactly what those words mean. And I think, that's very, very great for you to share that with all of us. As we come to a close here towards the end of the show, we like to end it with 3 things that can help take someone's career to the next level. Do you have 3 things that you would like to share with our audience today?
I don't have 3, but I got 4.
Okay, we'll take 4.
I would say one is challenge them. Challenge those folks. That's not something people do sometimes, but that's through the course of my career. That was something that I did. If I felt like it was time to challenge an individual, I would do it, not in a rude way or a bombastic way, but just challenge. What do you think? Encourage them. That's really important as well. Encouraging people, support them. Sometimes they need support, and it could be just a pat on the back. It could be something as an answer to a question. It could be something that was, of a personal matter. And then ultimately, the last thing, take them to lunch.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Thank you so much for giving us 4 great things to think through to help boost our careers, Bob. Any final thoughts for us today that you want to share that we didn't cover? Anything that felt compelling to you to share?
Well, I would say is you have contributed greatly to this conversation, Peter, and you should be commended for that. And I think it's great that you're in entering into this next level casino careers programming. I think I've kind of hit the high notes for my own particular life and my own particular involvement. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And I hope that things continue to work well for you. I'm quite confident it will.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for coming on today. I look forward to having you come back on again.
Thanks, Pete.
Check out more episodes on nextlevelcasinocareers.com.